So, hi. Let's see again Rachel and Estelle and Jonathan and Batya. Estelle, can you please just close the door? Close it all the way this time because if someone wants to come. All the way. Thank you. So, hi, good evening. So this is the second week we're doing this. It's called the Soul of the Parsha. And the idea is that every week, we take the Parsha Shavua and we find an element or a story or a hidden corner of the Parsha, and we try to open it up using the vocabulary and the terms and terminology of Pnimiyut Torah, the inner dimension of the Torah, Kabbalah and Chassidut. So last week was a very grandiose shiur about a lot of things, but that's okay because that was Bereshit, and the world was created, so it's okay to talk about big things. And today we're also going to talk about big things, but we're going to start out very small. We're going to start with a short story that takes place just after the flood. So the most of the parsha deals with the flood, God's decision to make the flood, and then choosing Noach and his family, and then the story of the flood itself, and then they come out, and then there's a covenant made between Noach and Hashem, symbolized by the rainbow, and immediately after that, there's a short, just between that and the listing of all the children of Shem, Ham, and Yefet, which leads to the story of the Tower of Babel, there's a short and sad incident. And this incident starts with Noach planting an orchard, and not an orchard, a vineyard, planting a vineyard and becoming drunk. And then rolling around in his tent, the sages say it was his wife's tent to make it sort of worse, that there's confusion, and he's naked. And he's described as a man of the earth, Isha Adama, which is quite a negative term, which will associate it. First, it's the second time it appears. It first appeared regarding Cain. So he becomes infatuated, or that's the word the sages use, that he becomes lahut, heated about earthly matters, and he becomes a drunk. And then Ham, one of the three children, comes in, and according to the Pshat, he just sees him naked. And then he tells his other siblings, he tells Shem and Yefet. Shem and Yefet are alarmed, they come in, they're very careful to walk backwards so that they don't look at their father naked, and they cover him up. And then it says that Noach woke up and saw what his youngest son, that's how we know that Ham is the youngest son, we didn't know that, did to him. It's unclear what he did to him, because according to the Pshat, he didn't do anything, he just saw him naked, but that's the first sort of bell that rings that something else is going on here. He saw what his son did to him, and then another mysterious thing happened. He doesn't curse his son, or punish in any way his son, Ham. He curses Ham's fourth son. Ham has four sons, Mitzrayim, Cush, Put, the lesser known of them, and Canaan. And Canaan, not for some reason, unexplained in the Pshat of the Torah, curses Canaan, the fourth son, and then he blesses Shem and Yefet. Different blessings, and we'll go into that in a minute. And he also says, after he curses Canaan, he says, you will be a slave to your brothers. And when he blesses Shem and Yefet, he says, and Canaan will be a slave to you. It's repeated twice in both their blessings. So it's a very sad story. It's a very anticlimactic moment in the story of Noach. It's one of the biggest questions of how could this man, who was the greatest tzaddik in all of humanity, the one chosen to sort of restart humanity, just like Adam and Eve, with this family. And so a lot of questions are raised by this. What's going on with Noach? What's going on with the three sons? And also, what did Ham exactly do there that Noach woke up and saw that something was done to him? So when Rashi interprets this, he says that there are two interpretations in Chazal as to what Ham did, because something was done. And they're both horrific. One of them was that he castrated him, and the other one was that he sexually abused him. Two options, very horrific, of what Ham did to his father. And that's what his father woke up and saw. But it's still not clear why he cursed Davka, Knan, the fourth son. And then when Rashi gets to that point of cursing Knan, then Rashi focuses just on one of these two interpretations, the castration one. And then he says like this. He says, Noach is really telling Ham this. He's telling him, you caused me to be infertile so that I can't have a fourth son. I could have had a fourth son. We live long, and 3 sons, I could have more. And now you close that option. I can't have a fourth son to serve me in my old age. And now also I'm going to be weaker even more. And now it's going to fall on the elder sons, the 2 elder sons that I have. So if you caused me not to have a fourth son, I'm going to curse symbolically, poetic justice, so to speak. I'm going to curse your fourth son, and I'm going to make him a servant for the other 2 children who now become my servants. They weren't supposed to be my servants. The fourth one, the youngest one, was supposed to help me when I was getting older. So this is the explanation Rashi gives. It all comes from Chazal. And it actually does tie a lot of loose ends, because we don't know what was done to him, and we don't know why he curses the fourth son. And this is like one answer that answers one idea, that he castrated him, therefore causing him not to have a fourth son, therefore that's why the fourth son is cursed. And then he says something else. He says, but why did Ham do it in the first place? And then he says, Ham told the brothers, when he explained to them why I did this, he said, Adam had 2 sons, and they quarreled over who would inherit the earth. And that caused the first murder in the world. And all the sins that came afterwards are, so to speak, descended from that one sin. Everything that caused the flood started with the sin of Cain and Abel. And our father has 3 sons already, 1 more than Adam had. And now he wants to have a 4th son. So I did this on purpose, so he doesn't have a 4th son, because it's bad enough that he has 3. And it's interesting, by the way, because he's the 3rd one. So he's almost saying like he shouldn't have given birth to me, even. Maybe he shouldn't have given birth to the 2nd one. All the more so to me, all the more so to the 4th son. So that's how he sort of posits it. And obviously we can hear that it's not just that. If we're talking about inheritance, right, the biggest fights in the world, or some of the biggest fights, and starts with Cain and Abel, are inheritance, quarrels. And it almost sounds like he doesn't want to get 25%. He wants to get a third, not a quarter of the inheritance. And he wants to make sure that happens. But we can hear that just thinking along the lines of maybe another murder is going to happen here, we're hearing again the echo of Cain. We heard the echo of Cain in Noach being described as the man of the earth, Isha Adama. And now we see it again echoing in Ham, when Ham is saying, you know, do you remember what happened? And it could happen again. There could be fights and killing and murder. Why are you even thinking along those lines? Why is that your association? So it is a kind of, and he's very close to maybe even himself murdering one of his siblings. If he's willing to castrate the father to make sure not a 4th one is born, then who knows? If he's thinking along these lines, he could be like another Cain maybe, who would kill one of his siblings, just like Cain did. All this is sort of suddenly floating around this story. So this is how it starts. Now, what is the echo of Cain here? Why is Cain suddenly important in this story? Why is he echoed twice? Once by Noach and the second time by Ham. So let's go a little bit back. So Adam and Eve had two sons. They were called Cain and Abel. And according to Kabbalah, these two souls, Cain and Abel, are the root souls of all souls. So we all come from Adam and Eve, but they were just created in the image of God. And then we have the first humans to be born. And they were Cain and Abel. So they symbolize two basic kinds of souls. Some souls come from Abel, some souls come from the side of Cain. Of course, it's two sides within every person also. Now, then Abel is killed. And another third son is born. Apropos, there is a third son, but he replaces Abel. He's called Seth. And Chava says, I was given this in place of Abel. So according to Kabbalah, this is the first time we have reincarnation in the Torah, Gilgul Neshamot. Abel was killed, the first murder, first death, and then the first birth that replaces a certain, very explicitly replaces someone else who was killed. So really Seth is the soul of Abel. And then we have two lineages. We have the descendants of Seth on one hand, the descendants of Cain on the other hand. Noach, of course, comes from Seth. Now, if we would just read the Torah without the Midrashim, we could think that the entire lineage of Cain has been wiped from the earth alongside with the flood. Because Noach and his family, so it appears, came from Seth. But then Chazal tell us that they answer the question that we don't know who was Noach's wife. And they say she was someone who is mentioned in the verses, Naamah. Naamah is one of the descendants of Cain. We therefore learn through this, again, the Torah leaves it open because we don't know who the mother was. But the sages make it very clear that she was a descendant of Cain. Therefore we know that we are all the descendants of Seth, which is really Abel, through Noach, and we're also all the descendants of Cain through Naamah, the wife of Noach. So now we know that he's still around, like that lineage and they're a very powerful lineage. Like Cain he was again a man of the earth. That is, that Abel is more spiritual and Cain is more physical, more material. And the descendants of Cain, they build cities, they do music, they build weapons, and it's a very powerful group. And that's where murder maybe also comes from, this power and this maybe more ego and more physicality and so on. And anyway, it's here present, and we can see that it plays in Noach, who isn't even descendant from Cain, and even more it plays in Ham. Noach just got drunk. Ham did something worse than that. So that's very interesting that now we have this in the background, that Cain's ghost is sort of hovering around this story. So that's just like the introduction. But what we really want to focus on is a very side issue, a very tiny thing that was said by the Chazal and then repeated by Rashi, which is the most interesting for me to open. What is the idea? What would have happened if Noach had a fourth son? Who would he have been? This idea is very, very sort of, it catches the imagination, because Shem, Ham, and Yefet is such a famous trio. It's repeated several times. It's always in the same order. Shem, Ham, and Yefet, Shem, Ham, and Yefet. And they symbolize a host of things. But there's never an idea of like a fourth brother there. So we know the trio, but just turning this triangle into a square is very interesting. What would be the fourth corner of this square? What do the three brothers even symbolize? And then if we know what they symbolize, maybe we can assume or conjecture as to who would have been the fourth son. And if we know who the fourth one would have been or should have been, we can say, well, how do we find him now? What do we do with him now? There's another ghost. This is the ghost. There's the ghost of Cain. But there's also the ghost of the unborn child of Noach. Who was the unborn child of Noach? So this is the topic of this shiur. Is we want to try and be detectives, and we want to try and find out who is the soul of Noach's unborn child, and how do we reincarnate him in some way. And of course, all this is not just history or esoteric history, or just, we want to find all the three souls that we know, and the one that hasn't been born within us, within our world today, within our own lives, and to find that missing person's case, the unborn person's case. So we have to start by trying to characterize Shem, Ham, and Yefet. And and see who they are. Now, we don't know a lot about them. In fact, the one thing we know about them is this story as to who they are. We know that Ham did this horrendous thing, starting with just not respecting his father's modesty and going on to the other Perushim. And we know that Shem and Yefet were far more careful regarding their father's respect, and we know that Ham was cursed and the other two were blessed. But we don't know much about them other than that. But we can know about them according to their descendants, if they symbolize three aspects of humanity, maybe three cultures or three practices, then we can tell about them through their children. So let's look at their children. So we'll start with Shem. Shem, his most famous descendant, is Ever, which leads to Abraham. Shem is the father of Judaism. That's why Judaism is known as Semitism, and hate for Israel is known as anti-Semitism. It all started with Shem. And of course, it's not just that. But this is the prominent descendant of Shem, is Ever, and then Abraham, the first Jew, the first bringer of monotheism and the bringer of faith in Hashem, and coming out of idolatry and spreading the word that there is one creator to the world and he should be served and thanked and so on. Yefet has a lot of sons, but there is one prominent one. And the prominent one is Yavan. That's one of his sons. He's the most famous son, the most celebrity son. Yavan is the father of Greek culture. And Yavan in Hebrew is Greece. So Yavan is the father of Greek civilization. Greek civilization symbolizes philosophy and science and mathematics and so on. There's another son, which is sort of another little less famous, but also important. His name isn't famous. He's called Tiras. But according to the Mefarshim, Tiras is Paras. Paras is Persia. Another very big, well-educated, impressive empire, which also had philosophy and art and so on. So, but Yavan is the main one. And Yavan is also one of our sort of arch enemies historically. The whole holiday of Hanukkah is to celebrate the conflict between Greek culture and Jewish culture. And then they become the foundations for Western culture, Jerusalem and Athens and all these ideas. So they're enemies, but there's something similar about them. When we see this here, that later on they're going to be enemies, but here they're good friends. They're covering their father together. Ham has, like we said, 4 children. One of them is not known, Put, but the other ones are very well known. Canaan, Mitzrayim is Egypt, and Cush is Africa. And what do these cultures have in common? Canaan is Canaan, the land of Israel, and all the peoples of Israel and their practices and so on, and then Egypt. And there are the two harshest enemies of Israel in the Tanakh. We're coming out of Egypt, running away from the bondage of Egypt, and we're going to Canaan in order to turn it into Israel, and there's also fighting the peoples of Canaan, the idolatry of Canaan. And the Cush is on the side, but what they have in common is that they're all very much into idolatry and into magic. We have the Khartoumim of Egypt. We have all the different soothsayers and witchcraft doers and the people who do seances and wake up the dead, and all these things have to do with Canaan and with Egypt. So now we have the 3 sons of Noach really symbolize 3 realms of human culture. Ham symbolizes, let's give each one of them 2 words. So for Ham, it's mythology and magic. Mythology and magic. Mythology is an explanation of the world in mystical terms. So you don't explore the laws of nature or anything of that nature. You don't explore. You see nature as it is, and your mind symbolizes it into forces and sees the world as a lot of different forces. And then as a mechashef, as a magician, you try to control those forces. So that's Ham. It's mythology and magic. And now Yefet would be philosophy and science, with mathematics in the center of it. So philosophy is a more intellectual way of understanding the world, and it explores nature more deeply, and it tries to find the laws of nature and so on. And science is the epitome, and technology maybe also. So maybe philosophy and technology, or science and technology. And finally, Shem symbolizes what the Torah wants to give to the world, or what Judaism wants to give to the world, which is another level, another thing, another realm, to open up a whole new level, which we can call Torah and commandments, Torah v'mitzvot. So we have mythology and magic, we have philosophy and technology, and we have Torah and commandments, or faith and commandments. So that's very interesting. But now it's even more interesting to try and guess who the fourth one is. But let's wait a little bit more. So now we have these three basic civilizations. Now another question is the order in which they're mentioned, the three sons. That's very interesting. They're mentioned always, except when their children are enumerated. But when their names are put together, it's always Shem, Ham, and Yefet. So the order is first Shem, then Ham, the magician, mythologer, and then Yefet, the philosopher-scientist. Now, why is this order? Is this the order they were born? No. How do we know their ages? At one point, when their children are specified or listed, then it says that Yefet is the older one. It says Yefet Agadol, the older Yefet. He was the oldest one. Yefet. The third to be mentioned, he's the first one, age-wise. And when Noach wakes up and sees what Ham did to him, he says, Asher asa lo bno hakatan, his youngest son, his young son. But it's clear that he's his youngest son, so Ham becomes the youngest one, and Shem becomes in the middle. So, but that's not the order that they're mentioned. They're not mentioned Yefet, Shem, and Ham, or Ham, Shem, and Yefet. They're mentioned Shem, Ham, and Yefet. So it's not very clear. And then Chazal in the Talmud, they come across this, and then they say very clearly, and they agree, there's no argument, that they're enumerated in the order of their wisdom. In the order of their wisdom. Shem is the first, he is the wisest, or his wisdom is the most supernal, or the most highest one, and then Ham, and then Yefet. And then in the Talmud, in the Gemara, we have Rashi, the interpreter, and then we have Tosfot. Tosfot are the late medieval interpreters who try to answer unanswered questions in the Talmud, and they do it by comparing a lot of their entire Talmud is spread out before them, and then they take different places. They try to answer questions in one place by addressing other things mentioned in other places in the Talmud. But here, on a very rare occasion, they ask a question and they have no answer. And it's put in Tosfot, it's a tiny little Tosfot. It's a question which is unanswered, but we want to answer it here. And the question is, how can this be the order of their wisdom? It doesn't make sense. It should have been Shem, Yefet, and Ham. That's all they say. But it's very clear what they mean. They mean that obviously it's very clear that everything that Greece symbolizes, which is philosophy and science and mathematics, is higher than magic and mythology and idolatry. How can Chazal, how can the sages say that Ham comes before Yefet because his wisdom is greater than Yefet's wisdom? It doesn't make sense. And they don't know how to answer this. So the Rambam Nachmanides tries to answer that Yefet and Ham, their wisdoms are on the same level. And the only thing that Chazal explained when they say Seder Chochmatam, by order of their Chochmah, is that Shem was the most important one, therefore he is first. And then the one to be born right after him was Ham, and then we forgot about Yefet, so we have to put him also. Okay, that's nice. But it still doesn't answer for me the Tosfot's question. What does it mean? How can it be that Ham comes before Yefet? And before we try to answer this, we'll just try and make this question even stronger. So just to see how much the order should have been, or was more reasonable, that it would have been Shem, Yefet, and Ham, just to see how much it's a perfect order. And we see this very beautifully if we look at the way Ham is cursed and Shem and Yefet are blessed. So when Ham is cursed, he says, not Ham, but Ham's Canaan. He says, Arur Canaan, cursed is Canaan, and he should be a slave to his brothers. And he doesn't mention any name of Hashem, because he's cursing. And then when he blesses Shem, Noach, when he blesses Shem, he uses, so it's important to know, to remind ourselves, that God has two main names in the Torah, in the Tanakh and in the Bible. One is the name, the four-letter, the tetragrammaton, which we call Yud K Vav K, or sometimes write it YHVH. So that's the main name, and this is the highest name, and this symbolizes being, and past, present, and future. And it's also like a second, it's like a first name, so to speak. And and that's the name that we say, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu. We come to Hashem as Atah. It's not some abstract power or force, it's very personal, and it also doesn't have a meaning in and of itself. It's like a name. And that's the highest name. And then Elokim is a lower name, and that is a word. It means gods, or it means forces, or it means judges also, Elokim, Elohim. And that's the lower kind of name, and that talks about Hashem's different powers as he operates in the world. It's not his essence, his abstract, unknowable essence, which we try to address and connect to. It's him as he operates in the world with many kind of forces or attributes. Now, there's something very beautiful in the gematria of those names, right? So gematria is Jewish numerology, and it's trying to see the numerical value of each word. So if we take the name of Havaya, the four-letter, the tetragrammaton name, it's four letters, Yud, Hey, and Vav, and Hey, and with the gematria, it's the number 26. A very well-known number, it's a very basic gematria. And if you take the other name, Elokim, but with a Hey, obviously, so we do the gematria, it becomes 86. The difference is 60. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, one of the nicest things it could mean is that 60 is the numerical value of the word kli. Kli is vessel or garment. So we can say that Elokim is the vessel or the garment of Hashem. Elokim equals kli havaya. And this goes along with a very famous verse which says Shemesh umagen havaya Elokim. Havaya Elokim, the two names, are correspondent to the sun and the sun's covering, so to speak. There's an idea in the Torah that the sun is covered by something. That the sun itself we can't see, it's too blinding. But the sun is covered by something. So the idea is that Shemesh umagen, the sun and its vessel, are just like Hashem and Elokim. So that exactly goes with this. Elokim is like the garment or the vessel containing. So Hashem itself is hidden, but Elokim is what he's known by somehow. And so again, Shem was blessed with the name Havaya. Shem, the father of Judaism, Torah, monotheism, is blessed with the name Havaya. That goes along with the Torah, with Abraham's legacy. Yefet is blessed with the name Elokim. And that goes along with philosophy and science very beautifully, because it doesn't explore God as a personal entity, a personal God. It explores God as the laws of nature, as the logos, as the mind, the mathematics, all these ideas. It's an impersonal God, but it's definitely something very high. The laws of nature tell you a lot of things about there being a hidden order within reality, and the Greeks were very spiritual in as much as they explored something like the laws of nature and mathematics. But it's not Havaya, it's Elokim. It's a more external level. Now, if we take these two numbers, 26, Havaya, and then 86, Elokim, we can do another step. We can add another 60. We get to 146. So what would be 146? There aren't that many words, but one of the most notable words is Olam. Olam is just world. And it comes from the same root as disguising or hiding something, He'elim. So now we have three words that are a series, 26, 86, 146, Havaya, Elokim, Olam. And this goes along perfectly with Shem and Yefet and Cham, because we can say that mythology and magic deal with the Olam, with the world on its out externality, when it hides Elokim and Havaya, it hides them both. And this goes along perfectly with the fact that Cham was insensitive regarding his father's modesty. What does it mean that you don't care about walking naked. Just like in Africa, in Africa especially, in Egypt and Canaan also, it was customary to walk naked. And he saw his father naked, he didn't cover him up. That goes along, why do we dress up? Why do we have tzniut? So the most simplest explanation is that by wearing garments, we are really trying to project to the other person, there's more to me than my body. You shouldn't look at my body, that's not the main thing about it. You should look at my face. Because my face is the window to my soul. That's where my facial expressions and my voice is coming out of there, and I can tell you who I am. But if you look at me when I'm naked, you're not seeing me for who I am, you're seeing the outside of me. If I put on clothes, then you look at my face and you start listening to me. And we can say that magic and mythology is looking at the world naked. It sees the world for what it is. It sees nature, it sees the forces of nature, and it's less sensitive of the inner dimension of things. When Greek culture, or all culture that has philosophy and science within it, it goes along with a higher degree of modesty in the sense, at least for the people who are doing this, maybe not for the popular culture, but for the philosophical culture, they are looking at the inside of the world. They're trying to find the laws of nature. They're trying to find hidden structures, numbers. They're trying to go deeper. And all the more so if you're talking about Hashem, which is completely invisible, and believing in Him and so on. So that's why Shem and Yefet, although later in Chanukah they're going to be enemies, because of whether you were serving Elokim or Hashem, just the laws of nature or the structures and all, or Torah, now they're very good friends. Because when you compare them to Ham, who is more materialistic, we can say, or is looking at the outside of things, or sees the world as it is physically, but doesn't try to find the hidden divine layers within it, then it makes a lot of sense. There's something very beautiful about this structure, that Ham should have been the third one to be mentioned. Mythology and magic are dealing with Olam, with the world, and then philosophy and science try to find Elokim within the Olam, to take off the Kli, to find Elokim within Olam, right? Olam is Kli Elokim. And then Shem is trying to even remove another external garment, but trying to find Havaya within Elokim. So the order should have been, according to this very beautiful structure, it should have been again Shem, and Yefet, and Cham, but it isn't. And Chazal say that the order of the wisdom is Shem and Cham and Yefet. So there's something more mysterious going on here. So now we can ask a very interesting question. And this will lead us to who the fourth son could have been. But we're starting with just Shem, Cham, and Yefet and their order. What could it be that it stands between philosophy and science and Torah and monotheism and mitzvot? That is higher than philosophy of science, but lower than faith and religion and monotheism. That is somehow maybe connected to magic and mythology, but it's not magic and mythology, it's something else. It could be in that intermediate level, that to explain the order, Shem and then Cham and then Yefet.
Yeah. Like what you said, what you were saying before. The unknown, what's beyond. Thinking that maybe there is a beyond that's unknown.
So
I know I grasp the world.
But he said, so again, philosophy and science, Greek science, they're trying to find the hidden order of things. And Abraham discovers the invisible God, the one God that's beyond all the laws of nature and everything, who created nature with its laws. So an answer comes from a very interesting thing that was once said by Hagra, by the Vilna Gaon. He once said something very interesting. He said that there are three wisdoms. Again, three, but it's not the three that we just enumerated, it's a little different. There are three wisdoms which are completely divine and pure and eternal. The first one is Torah. The second one is mathematics. Actually, that's the third one. And the one in between is music. Music. It says music is very pure. In its essence, it's very pure. It's just like mathematics, very similar to mathematics, and there are mathematical structures within music. And it doesn't have like a value system. It's not. It's very abstract. It could be very spiritual, and the wisdom of he spoke about the classical music and with mathematics and so on. But he says the wisdom of music is one of the three divine eternal wisdoms, that only one of them was brought to the world by Judaism, and it has to do with Torah. The other two are outside of it, and one of them is music, and the other one is mathematics, which is the foundation of science. And of course, music comes from the Greek word muse. And some of the philosophers, like most notably Plato, would say that he was a philosopher and very intellectual, and all the logic was done through dialectics, and it was very logical. But the most interesting moments about him is that when he says that there is something beyond logic and mathematics, which is the muse that inspires him. And he spoke about something called divine madness, which is something that is a high kind of madness or a high kind of intuition that is higher than the intellect, but it's not madness in the regular sense. It's something else, and it has to do with music. And also his teacher, which was one of his teachers was Pythagoras, and Pythagoras he was a mathematician and a scientist, but he spoke about mathematics as made the laws of nature as being based around musical harmonies that are hidden in the world. So now we have a very interesting idea here, that maybe identifying Cham with magic and mythology and idolatry, that's just Cham after the sin, after the fall. Because we learned this from his descendants, from Egypt and Canaan and Cush. That's all later on. But right now, we don't know who he is, and we don't know who he was before he did this sin. Maybe he was... and we know that the order is Shem, Cham, and Yefet. So we know, and Chazal say that it's the order of wisdom, so we know he was higher than Yefet, spiritually or symbolically. So now this gives us a very interesting idea. Cham is not originally about magic and mythology and idolatry. He's about music. He's about music. And he was a musician. And how do we know this? Because we said that he, more than his brothers, is like the son of his mother or the son of Cain. And the lineage of Cain had a lot of musical elements to it. Why? 3 reasons. The first poem in the Torah was said by Naama's father Lemech. When Lemech said, it was a very hard poem, he says, "Listen to me, my wives, and hearken my words, and I shall kill a man for every wound that I have, and a child for every smaller wound or bruise that I have." But the structure is poetic. It sort of splits the verse into 2, and it has this corresponding structure. It's a classical, biblical, poetical structure. So the descendant of Cain was the musician, and one of his sons, Yuval, was the first musician. It says very clearly he was the first player of musical instruments. He was the first builder and player of musical instruments. And Naamah, the wife of Noach, it says in the Midrashim, she was a drummer. It says she was a drummer. So there are a lot of things said about her, some very good, some very bad. And one of the bad things was she was a drummer for idolatry, rites of idolatry, which doesn't make sense how she was Noach's wife, but she has a lot of sides to her. She deserves a whole class sometime. But she was a drummer. And also the word Naamah, her name, is the same root of the word in Hebrew, Ne'imah, which is tune. So the lineage of Cain is very musical. And Cham inherited this. And Cham was supposed to be a musician. Why did he become a magician, not a musician? Because it's really very similar. What is music? Music is a subtle art, a subtle kind of witchcraft. It bewitches you. It tries to move your emotions in a way that you lose control, and it takes you in it enchants you. It hypnotizes you. Like the Indian hypnotizer who bewitches the snake with his flute. So that's a perfect image of how magic and music go together. That the most ancient symbol of hypnotism is not the pendulum or is not listen to my words, it's the flute with the snake. So we can say this. We can say that Cham was supposed to be a musician. And so again, we say that witchcraft within music is a kind of subtle kind of witchcraft. We can say the same thing about witchcraft or magic. Witchcraft and magic is a coarse kind of music. Is using the power of music, the power to, for example, orchestrate a band, or to lead, to move our emotions in different directions, and takes it in a much coarser direction of maybe trying to have ecstatic rites in which we lose ourselves, in which we reach a state of ecstasy and abandon. And we try to lose our mind, to bury our minds, to sink our consciousness and our rational part of us into the rhythm of the circle and things that are associated with magical rites and idolatry rites. And it also tries to bewitch nature in ways that are considered that they hide. One of the explanations of why witchcraft is asur in Judaism, it's forbidden, is that it hides Hashem's presence in the world. Hashem is really, He's the master magician of everything. And when we become the magicians, we have to move things around or control nature, then we hide the fact that there is one. And we also lose modesty and we lose simple, tamim faith. After all the methods of foretelling the future and bringing back the dead, and all these are enumerated in Parashat Shoftim, in the book of Dvarim, in Deuteronomy, then it says, don't do all of that. Don't use crystal balls, and don't have channelers and all this, or magicians. You should just be tamim. Tamim is simple and earnest and wholehearted and serve Hashem with simple faith. We don't want any of these. But the root of all these negative things is maybe music. It's maybe art. So what we have here is something very interesting of what's going on here. Cham is the root. The root of his soul is very high, higher than Yefet, higher than philosophy, higher than mathematics, higher than science. It has to do with music and the power of music to elevate us beyond intellect, beyond rationality, and touch something divine. That's what he was supposed to do. And that's his root. But when he started worrying about himself, not having another brother, how great his part of the inheritance would be, thinking in the lines of the negative element of Cain, of having ego and trying to be fighting with his brothers and trying to make sure that there's not another brother, and maybe starting another new fight with his brothers, and of course castrating the fight, all these ideas, which come from the fact that so again, Cain was the first villain, but he has also, why do Chazal tell us that Naamah, his descendant, we want Cain's lineage, we want his ego, we want his creativity, we want his desires, we want them elevated, we want them rectified. Ham was on that crossroad. He was there, but the moment he lost sight of what music should be, he deteriorated. And now we can say this, that when he castrated his father and made it so that he can't have another fourth son, he became the fourth son. Because now we have the structure has 4 levels to it. Before we had Torah and commandments, philosophy and technology, and mythology and magic. But now we have music. We have 4 levels now. And we know that, and the order is the higher 3 levels. We have Shem, which is Torah, and we have Cham before the sin, which is music, and we have Yefet, which is philosophy. But then there's a 4th level of magic. So when Cham sinned, he fell from the 2nd slot to the 4th slot. He became the 4th son, and that's why he curses his 4th son. It's like an echoing what you are becoming now. And maybe he's also telling him that music is supposed to serve something higher than it when he curses him, that his 4th son would be a servant now.
So the music, he had the music until he sinned?
So like all this symbolizes what music can be, and what it became, and what it can re-become, what it can become again. Cham is the story of the spirit of music within human nature, within human civilization. That what it's supposed to be, what it originally was meant to be, what it still could be, if we rectify Cham, is something that connects us to something that is above our intellect, that is higher than our intellect, that causes us to recall and remember our divine nature and the divine source of our being, and bring us closer to God, closer to faith, closer to meaning, closer to... It wants to take us upwards. But many times, that's not what art does. Many times, what art does is try to take us lower. It tries to awaken lower desires and lower urges, and to bring up darker elements within us, and to really make us not remember Hashem, forget Hashem, to hide Hashem, not to reveal Hashem's hidden names or hidden properties or his hidden presence within reality, but just exactly opposite, forget about it, and see nature for what it is, cruel and absurd and material and only full of earthly desires and conflict, and just echo that. Let's just echo that again and again. And in that echo chamber, we forget everything that has to do with our soul and with Hashem. And much of art is trying to do that in many, many different ways. Whether it's music that pulls us downwards into our more guttural, lowly urges and tries to awaken them and make us more, full of base desires, and tries to echo them and strengthen them. Or maybe it just tries to somehow hypnotize us or drug us into forgetting who we are, what we are for. It's just supposed to be a form of escape. And, I was just recently, someone recommended a work of art that I see in an exhibition. And I didn't go see the exhibition, but I saw the video of the installations that they had there. And the person was very excited by what she felt to be very, very deep ideas that were presented in those videos. And my feeling was that the artist was very good in creating a sense of meaning, but not real meaning. And that's not the same thing. Meaning is something that you can formulate, and then you can argue with, and then you can see where it leads you, and it grows and it adds to things. And it creates a message or something, it brings you in a clearer direction. A sense of meaning is something which is almost the opposite of meaning. You get a sense of something very deep was said here. You're not sure what it was, you can't really describe it, you can't really say but you're walking away you feel filled with a kind of sense of meaning. But it doesn't lead you anywhere. You're not improved, it doesn't build you in any way, it doesn't. And so I think everything that comes out of this is that both as artists and as how do you say tzarchanei omanut, consumers of art, we need to ask ourselves, what kind of art is this that we're seeing or listening to or reading, whatever it is? Could be any art, because music is maybe the art of arts in some way, or it symbolizes all of art, but we can expand this to all art. And where is this coming from, and where is this taking me to? Is this elevating me, or is this doing the opposite? Is this reminding me of my soul root, my soul root, and my higher purpose? Is this bringing me closer to this or not? Is this very beautiful and interesting and original and moving and absorbing and captivating and all these words, but it doesn't do what I came here to do, which is reconnect to my soul and then try to live my life according to my higher nature and my higher self and higher divine wisdom. So where is this taking me? And as the creator of art, the same thing. What am I trying to do here? Am I trying to do something that reminds my listener or viewer or reader of who they are and real meaning and real purpose, or am I trying to make them forget about it and just sink into their bodies and into their subconscious and get lost there? And Cham symbolizes both these levels. Very interesting. He either takes the second slot or the fourth slot. Yefet is steady in the third one, and Shem is steady in the first one. But Cham should have been in the second place and fell down to the fourth. And maybe what should have been the fourth son was was a person that would have taken music and would have taken it into the level of so-called magic and idolatry and nature and echoing the law, but would have done it in a rectified way because he should have been born normal. But because he wasn't born, Ham fell to where that fourth son should have been, and of course they did it in a negative way because this whole thing is a fall. And rising up again, maybe now he will be both the second and the fourth son once we rectify the pool of magic and mythology and idolatry that is today within art. If we take art and we elevate it, but we take up all the sparks of the lower negative klipa external sort of art, but we elevate them and we go up from them and we turn it into a higher spiritual upward raising, that raises our soul and our eyes upwards, then we could rectify Cham in this way. So the whole story that we end up with was a long journey and a lot of inspection and structures, but it all leads us to something very beautiful. That we needed to have all these elements in order to get here. The Cham is on the crossroads between music and magic. And again, it's really symbolizes two kinds of art: higher art and lower art, or art that elevates and art that pulls us downwards. And there's one of the things that I read that most influenced my own journey to Judaism was something written by Tolstoy. So he was in his life one of the greatest writers in Russia, and he was very famous. And then he says that during the time that then he had a big crisis. And then he became Christian. And he stopped writing for many years. And when he came back to writing, it was completely different. And it was all about faith. And he said that when he was with the writers and teachers, not teachers, the writers and artists and poets, they felt that they were really the highest elite, more than the politicians, more than the teachers, more than anyone, because they were the teachers of culture. They were the leaders of culture. And he said, we led, but we didn't know where we were leading. As long as people were buying the books and applauding and telling us how original and thoughtful and deep and interesting and thought-provoking and moving and so on, all they were, which is all just aesthetic terms, not ethical terms. Because at that time, there was something called the division or the separation between ethics and aesthetics. And art was all about just the aesthetic. Aesthetic could be both pretty and ugly and beautiful and disgusting as long as it's moving. So that's the aesthetic, but nothing to do with the ethical. I'm not supposed to deal with the ethical, I'm an artist. So, and it says, but we influenced a lot of people. We created the atmosphere of Russia and beyond Russia. But we didn't know what we were doing, and we kept applauding one another and getting applause and all this. We had no idea where we were taking everyone. We were just, wherever our art led us, we led them, assuming it would be a good place. But I didn't see it becoming a good place. I saw it becoming a worse place. Every emotion was valid. Every emotion could be opened up. And then the more you do this, the more you open up the darker emotions, the lower emotions, the baser ones, because there's gravity and it pulls you. And then he had the big crisis and he couldn't write anymore. And then suddenly he looked at the Cossacks. They were farmers. They were going to church every Sunday and just believed in God and prayed and were thankful and he says there's something about them that's higher than where I am. And that's a little bit like Cham doing art that he thinks is very high, but it really is very low. And then he sees someone who's has emunah, some kind of faith in God, and he says there's something about him that's higher than me. And then he changed everything. And then again, if he didn't write for many years, then came back to writing, but he wrote about his crisis and about rediscovering faith in some way. And so this is a very, very basic human juncture that Cham is here symbolizing. And so again, both as creators and consumers of art, this is something definitely to think about as we go through our lives. And I find it a very powerful and fruitful compass with which to, again, both create and consume works of art and everything that has to do with the aesthetic. Another beautiful thing here that I didn't say is that the names Shem, Yefet, and Cham, linguistically, Shem is a noun, and it just means name, because it alludes to Hashem's essential name, his essence, his whatness. It's a noun. Yefet is a verb. Yefet explores the rules of nature, the forces of nature. The forces of nature are like the verbs of God. There's also a term called mif'alot Elokim. Mif'alot is the root of poal, verb. Elokim is the name associated with that we associated with science. So that's a verb, the forces of nature. And Cham is an adjective. Adjective is how things appear. And it isn't just any adjective, it's warm. Cham means warm or hot. And so it has to do with the appearance of things. The adjectives are what they appear to be, the properties that they have. So he's the artist. And the Yefet is the person of action, both in terms of understanding God's action, exploring nature, and doing technology. And Shem is about names, the essence of things, the what of things. So Cham is about adjectives, how they appear, if it's hot or what's the aesthetic. And he's passionate about it, he's warm-hearted about it. That's one of that. So it comes from Cain, but on the surface, Cham is cursed, Canaan at least is cursed, and the other two are blessed. But at the end of days, we want Cham to be elevated. We don't want any one of them cursed. We don't want any part of humanity or human nature to be completely pushed away. That's not the point. The point is to elevate. So we'll just finish with a beautiful, again, gematria, that all of the Torah, it leads to an end point, and the end point is called the Messianic days, Mashiach. The word Mashiach, four-letter word. So one nice thing about it is it has the name Shem in it, also has the name Cham in it. If it's Cham, then the other two letters are the acronym of Shem and Yefet. If it's Shem, the other two letters are the acronym of Cham and Yefet. But it's something more beautiful. If we take the word Mashiach and we write it, it's called B'milui. Milui is the letters that fill up the letters. What do I mean? Mem is just a letter, right? But the word Mem, the name Mem, has two letters. It's Mem and another Mem. And then Shin is a letter, just one letter. But if we write the word Shin, it's three letters. It's Shin, Yud, Nun. And then Yud is Yud, Vav, Dalet. And then Chet is Chet, Yud, Taf. That's called writing something in Milui. The gematria becomes bigger, and it sort of opens, it unfolds everything that's hiding within it. It opens up the word to its sub-components. So then we have Mem, Shin, Yud, Chet. If we do this gematria, it's Shem, Yefet, and Cham. It's all three. And so Mashiach, that wants to bring peace to the entire world and elevate all of humanity, is not just Shem and Yefet, whom Noach blessed. It's also Cham, whom Noach cursed. Because that curse was just really a reflection of the defilement of music and art. And therefore the elevation of music and art, bringing it back to its root, to its higher divine. Emunah, Umanut and Emunah come from the same root. Umanut has to be about Emunah, has to connect us to Emunah, to faith. So that would be the elevation of Cham, and Mashiach's name wouldn't be complete without Cham in it. So,
do we know who Cham is there?
Art.
No. Oh, okay. So
that's
but
the whole
you don't
thing.
see it as a people.
It's not a people. It's not. Yeah. So it's been shuffled again and again. All the nations of the world have been shuffled and reshuffled. So Shem, or the descendant of Abraham, that's the Jewish people. That's supposed to remain sort of isolated in some way or distinct. But of course, there's a very fundamental idea is that all concepts are inter-included in one another. So all the Shem and Cham are within Yefet, and Yefet and Shem are within Cham, and so on. So everyone, we have all these three sides to us. We all come from all of them in some way. And also, it's even, the Chassidut talks about there being a divine soul, an intellectual soul, and an animal soul. That's again the three brothers. The divine soul is Shem. Shem symbolizes the divine soul, Yefet the intellectual soul, and Cham the animal soul. But there is a certain sense in which the animal soul can and should be higher than the intellectual soul, which is taking the animal part and elevating it to the super rational faculty of art and music. That is super rational. But it's connected somehow to the animal soul more than to the intellectual soul. So all this, so Cham is art, and Cham is also the animal soul. And it can go very high or very low, and that depends on what kind of art we create and consume. So that's the compass we should be taking from this, the lesson to be taken from this class. So it starts small, it ends big. Al-Tan. It's always very hard to finish a class because I talk and suddenly finishing is very sort of weird for me. Thank you for coming.
You were saying like you have the root souls that are Cain and Hevel, and then from there it goes to 3.
Yeah,
I still don't like I understand what the Gra is saying about the 3 wisdoms, and I understand about like but then he's saying like having more than 2 kids is bad because Cain
killed Abel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why are we even talking about a 4th?
Well, he was wrong when he said that you shouldn't give birth to more children. That was a warped kind of thinking. When Cham was saying, well, 2 are fighting, so 3 is worse, and 4 is even worse than that. That's a warped thinking. That's when why do you even think about anyone killing anyone else? That comes from the kind part, the unrectified kind part of you. You should have many children. They should all, Bezrat Hashem, be very good siblings and brothers and love and have no quarrel over their inheritance, Bezrat Hashem. And if something happens, then we'll deal with it, we confront it. But we don't, lechatchila, try to... Now, as for there being, as I said, that all the souls come from either Cain or Hevel, and then there are 3 sons. So in Kabbalah, it says that Shem is very much coming from Hevel, and Cham is coming from Cain, and Yefet is a combination. Dafka Yefet, again, is in the middle, and he's a bit of a combination. And also, I said that Yefet is Greek culture, but to be precise, Greek culture is both Yefet and Cham, because there was a popular Greek culture and the higher Greek culture, and they weren't the best of friends because there was a democratic vote, and they voted to kill their most important philosopher, which was Socrates. So, and then the philosophers didn't like democracy. So the whole, and they were completely opposite, because the popular culture was all about the body and youth and nudity, and the philosophers were all about, this is just very material, and you should go for the soul and science.
Yeah, but at the same time they had so much idolatry.
Yeah, but no, the philosophers not so much. They didn't care about this. The philosophers were monotheistic. Plato and Aristotle were monotheistic. They didn't have a personal God that you pray to, the tshuva to, and you feel humble before. But they had an impersonal, intellectual God, but it was one God. It was one cause behind everything. It is one logos behind everything. So they were higher, and also historically, Greek was created out of 2 cultures. There was the natives, who were very much Cham sort of cultures, in the sense they were connected to Egypt and Canaan, and they were into very base kind of idolatry that had to do with animals, like the animal soul. They bowed before oxes and snakes and eagles and so on. And then there was the culture that conquered them, and they had human figure idols. And Greek culture is a combination of both. It's really Yefet and Cham together. It's called Yavan because Yefet was the conqueror. But they had both. And the mythology reflects it. You have the gods and the heroes fighting all these monsters, underground monsters. So that's the intellectual soul fighting the animal soul. It's also higher agriculture fighting lower. It's Shem. It's a Yefet and Cham. Yeah.
Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom.